Perth is Australia's sunniest, most isolated capital, but its history is anything but quiet. Founded as a struggling colony, saved by gold and transformed by mining, this is the story of how Perth went from the end of the world to a 21st-century boomtown. Welcome to the History of Perth. Whispers of the Ancients, the spirit of Perth's first people. Long before concrete touched the earth and towers pierced the sky, the land we now call Perth pulsed with life, a sacred tapestry woven over 48,000 years by the Noongar people, who speak of their connection to this place not in centuries, but in the timeless breath of forever. This sunlit stretch along the Swan River was no mere landscape, it was Whadjuk Noongar, ancestral ground of the Whadjuk Noongar, a people bound by spirit to the wetlands and coastal plains that fed them and cradled their stories. Led by the wise Yellaganga, the Muro clan walked these lands, their lore etched into the winds and water, their identity sewn into every bend of the river. But with the coming of British settlers, this harmony was fractured, and generations of erasure followed. Yet, the spirit of the land and its first people endured. In a stirring arc of justice, the federal court in 2006 acknowledged what the Noongar had always known, their unbroken connection to country. After decades of struggle, tears, and resilience, history was rewritten. In 2021, the Noongar people stood tall as the rightful custodians of Perth, enshrined in law by the Noongar Kura Nitja Burdahuan Recognition Act, a healing breath across generations, and a solemn promise that the past, present, and future of Perth would forever honor its first voices. The River of Black Swans, when Europe first found Perth. In the blistering heat of an unfamiliar land, on January 10, 1697, Dutch Captain Willem de Vlaming stepped ashore onto what would one day become the city of Perth, a silent frontier cloaked in mystery and songlines. With cautious footsteps, his men pressed inland, their boots marking trails where none of their kind had ever walked, their eyes searching for signs of life beyond the glinting trees and restless winds. What they found instead was a river unlike any other, teeming with graceful, obsidian-feathered creatures gliding across the water. In awe they named it Swart-Sween Rivier, the Black Swan River, a name whispered across centuries. Yet despite the haunting beauty of this untouched wilderness, de Vlaming and those who followed saw only hardship in its wild serenity. To them, the land was too fierce, too unfamiliar, too resistant to their vision of civilization. And so they turned away, unaware that beneath the quiet surface, a city was already breathing, one that would rise not just from the soil but from the stories that came before. Founding on fractured ground, the birth of the Swan River Colony. In 1829, as the British ships Parmelia and Sulphur sliced through the waters of the Indian Ocean, their passengers caught sight of the untouched western shores of a vast and ancient land. Captain James Stirling, his heart swelling with ambition, declared the place as beautiful as anything of this kind I had ever witnessed. It was here, beneath skies wide and unspoiled, that his people would plant the seeds of empire, the Swan River Colony, a settlement carved from dreams and shadowed by resistance. On August 12, Helen Dance struck the first symbolic blow with her axe, felling a tree to mark the founding of Perth. But beneath the surface of this colonial pageantry was a slow unraveling, a clash of worlds. The Noongar people, custodians of the land for countless generations, saw their spiritual grounds transformed into farmland, their sacred spaces fenced and claimed. Tensions ignited into bloodshed, the killing of settlers, the execution of the elder Midjiguru without trial, the slaying of his son Yagan, and the horror of the Pinjarra massacre. Dispossessed and pushed to the margins, the Noongar were corralled into swamps and lakes north of the growing settlement, Boodjamuling among them, where they lived alongside vagrants, miners, and the forgotten. Thus, Perth was born not merely from exploration but from confrontation, a city whose foundations still echo with the voices of those it tried to silence. Chains and fortune, Perth's transformation in the age of convicts and gold. In the parched and sun-baked lands of Western Australia, desperation and ambition forged a new chapter for Perth. By 1850, the colony, still struggling under the weight of its isolation, opened its gates to a controversial solution: convicts. At the plea of settlers hungry for labor, iron chains arrived by the thousands. Over 18 years, nearly 10,000 convicts disembarked from 43 ships, outnumbering the free settlers and forever imprinting the city with stories of hardship, resilience, and rebirth. Perth became a city of paradoxes, built by those once condemned, yet rising steadily from the dust. Then the desert whispered promises of riches. Gold gleamed in Kalgoorlie and Coolgardie, igniting a fever that drew adventurers and dreamers across the continent. The city surged with life, pulsing as a vital artery for the booming gold fields. Prosperity flowed like a river of molten metal, funding grand public works and transforming Perth's modest streets into a growing metropolis. From chains to gold, Perth's metamorphosis was swift, gritty, and unstoppable, a tale etched in stone and shimmering dust. The reluctant ally, Perth's struggle for identity in a new nation. As the 20th century dawned, Perth stood at a crossroads, both geographically and politically, a distant outpost wary of binding itself to the ambitions of the eastern colonies. In 1901, after fierce debate and reluctant negotiation, Western Australia joined the newly formed Federation of Australia, the last colony to sign on, won over only by promises of a great steel artery, the Transcontinental Railway, to tether it to the rest of the nation. Yet beneath this formal unity, the pulse of dissent beat strong. In 1933, the people of Western Australia roared with a stunning two-thirds vote for secession, seeking to cast off Canberra's shadow. But even as they voted to break away, they ousted the very leaders who championed their independence. The British Parliament refused their plea, and Perth remained bound to the Commonwealth, a city caught between defiance and resignation. Meanwhile, injustice ran deep. From 1927 to 1954, Indigenous Australians were banned from much of Perth, punished for entering their own ancestral lands. Still, the city endured. After World War II, it surged forward with bold visionaries like Russell Dumas and grand post-war projects, as dams, airports, and industrial giants reshaped its skyline. Perth, once a hesitant partner in a distant federation, was becoming a beacon of industry and resilience, forging its own place in Australia's story, one hard-won chapter at a time. City of Light, Perth's leap into the modern age. In the glow of a new era, Perth transformed from a sleepy coastal capital into a sprawling modern metropolis. The 1950s heralded a bold new vision. The Stephenson-Hepburn Report reimagined the city not in the likeness of London, but with the vast, car-centric sprawl of North America. Highways replaced tramlines, suburbs unfurled across the plains, and the Narrows Bridge tethered north and south. As mines in the outback boomed, so too did Perth, the city becoming the beating heart of Western Australia's growing wealth. But it was in 1962 that Perth captured the world's imagination. As astronaut John Glenn soared above in Friendship 7, residents flicked on every light in a stunning tribute, earning their home the title City of Light. The world watched again in 1998, when the act was lovingly repeated. Fueled by iron ore, gold, and gas, Perth prospered through the late 20th century, growing ever skyward as its resources flowed outward. The 1990s brought administrative change, with the city's heart carved into distinct local governments, and by the 2000s the mining boom reignited a fresh wave of ambition. Towers rose, the riverfront came alive with Elizabeth Quay, and Perth once again stepped into the global spotlight, not just as a city that lit up the sky, but one that had learned to shine on its own. From a lonely outpost to a city of skyscrapers, Perth's journey proves that even the most remote places can thrive. If you enjoyed this look at Australia's Western gem, hit like, subscribe, and tell us, would you brave the isolation to live in Perth? Thanks for watching History Love.